Welcome back to the deep dive. I have to say, I have been looking forward to this one all week because we are tackling a subject that I think every single person listening has a stake in, whether you realize it or not.
Oh, for sure.
It's about nostalgia, it's about the massive grinding machinery of Hollywood, and most importantly, it is about dragons.
It is always about dragons.
Always. But specifically, we're looking at this idea, this concept of the golden age of fantasy. I mean, you look around the streaming landscape right now, and it feels like we won, right?
The nerds won.
The nerds won. There are dragons on HBO. There are Rings of Power on Amazon. There are adaptations of literally everything we read in middle school hitting the screen with, $100 million budgets. It should be paradise.
Should be.
But there is a catch.
There is always a catch. And the catch usually is the quality. Or, perhaps more accurately, the fidelity. We're seeing more content than ever, but there's a growing sentiment, and a very loud one in certain corners of the internet, that this quantity has come at the cost of the soul of these stories.
Exactly, the soul. And today, we are zooming in on one specific battleground, larger war, for the soul of fantasy. Disney's upcoming adaptation of Christopher Paolini's Inheritance.
Which most people just know as Eragon.
Right, just Eragon. And this is an incredibly high-stakes project. You have a beloved childhood classic. I mean, this book series defined the fantasy genre for a whole generation of young...
It really did. And now you have the biggest media conglomerate in the world, Disney, taking the reins.
Yeah.
And on top of all that, you have a fan base that has already been burned once before.
Oh, burned badly by that 2006 movie adaptation.
Which was terrible. So it's the perfect storm for analysis.
And to guide us through this, we are looking at a breakdown provided by John Delarose. Now, for those who don't know, John Delarose is a fantasy writer himself. He's a commentator, and let's just say a very skeptical observer of the current Hollywood landscape.
That's a good way to put it.
He provides a perspective that he calls cautiously optimistic about it. But I have to say that optimism is buried under a mountain of anxiety about the industry as a whole.
Right. And what makes his perspective so interesting for our deep dive today is that he represents a very specific and very vocal segment of the audience. He's looking at this through the lens of a creator who feels that modern storytelling has, lost its way.
He uses some very strong words.
He does.
Yeah.
He uses words like degeneracy, and he explicitly fears political agendas being injected into these stories. So our mission today is to really parse through his arguments. We aren't just talking about a TV show announcement.
No.
We are analyzing the friction between the original creators like Paolini, these massive corporate studios like Disney, and the skeptical fans who are just, they're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
So let's unpack this. The big question on the table, can a childhood favorite actually survive the Hollywood machine in the modern era?
Or are we just destined for another letdown?
To answer that, we first have to understand the landscape that Delarose is. He paints this picture of a genre in crisis. He acknowledges that, on paper, this is a golden age.
Sure. We're getting adaptations left and right.
But he argues that the studios have gone way too
overboard. That's an interesting. It implies excess, a lack of control, maybe?
Exactly. And he starts by throwing some serious shade at the heavy hitters. He brings up Game of Thrones. Now, most people, I think, hold up the early seasons of Game of Thrones as the gold standard of fantasy. It proved you could do fantasy for adults.
It changed everything.
But Delarose sees it differently. He argues that the Game of Thrones influence has actually been a net negative.
Now, this is a really fascinating take. He uses that word you mentioned, degeneracy.
He does. He specifically cites the upcoming spin-off, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. His argument is that the grimdark, the morally gray, the often explicit nature of George R.R. Martin's work has bled into everything else.
So it sort of lowered the tone of the entire genre.
That's his view. He doesn't think Knight of the Seven Kingdoms looks like a good adaptation, and he says it pretty explicitly. He just doesn't like Martin's work in general.
Wow, okay. That is a hot take, especially considering Martin is usually treated like royalty in these circles.
It is, but it sets the stage perfectly for where Delarose is coming from. He wants heroic fantasy. He wants, clearer lines between good and evil. He wants nobility.
And he feels that the industry has mistaken adult for degenerate.
That's the core of it, the gratification of fantasy, and he doesn't stop at HBO. He moves right on to Amazon, Rings of Power.
The Ring. I feel like that's become the default punching bag for critics who share Delarose's worldview.
It really has. He lumps it in with The Hunt for Gollum, that new Peter Jackson verse project, as examples of these high-budget projects that, in his view, or at least that are being made badly.
So it's the throwing money at the problem critique.
Exactly, just because you have $1 billion. But here is where it gets really interesting, and maybe the most controversial point in his whole landscape analysis. He brings up Brandon Sanderson.
Ooh, okay. This is significant. Because Brandon Sanderson he's the king of modern fantasy output. He writes like a machine. He's generally beloved by the fandom.
universally beloved, I would have thought. But Del Arroz claims that Sanderson has gone, and this is a direct quote, full-on LGBTQ act in his Stormlight archive.
Okay, let's break that down for a minute, because obviously there are LGBTQ characters in those books. It's not a secret.
Yeah.
But Del Arroz frames this not as, say, inclusion, but as activism.
Right. And this is a really crucial data point if you want to understand the source's perspective. He is looking at the inclusion of LGBTQ themes not as a natural evolution of storytelling or, character development.
As an agenda.
An agenda that he feels compromises the work. He then predicts that because of this perceived shift in Sanderson's writing, the upcoming adaptations of the Cosmere on Apple TV are going to be, and I'm quoting, oh boy.
Oh boy, he's doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sense.
A lot of heavy lifting. He implies that Apple TV, which, has its own reputation for progressive content combined with Sanderson's recent writing, will result in something that completely alienates a certain type of conservative or traditional fan.
So it's a fear of the message overtaking the medium.
That's it exactly. So if HBO is too degenerate for him, and Amazon is too corporate, and Apple is too woke, to use the shorthand, is there anything he actually liked? Because if it's all doom and gloom, why even bother watching?
He does offer a counterexample.
Yeah.
He points to the Pendragon cycle, which was produced by the Daily Wire.
Right.
He calls that real good. And he also praised Stephen R. Lawhead's original books that it's based on.
Okay, so that establishes a pretty clear binary in his world. On one side, you have what he considers real independent fantasy, or fantasy produced by outlets he trusts, like the Daily Wire.
And on the other, you have the big studio agendas of Disney, Amazon, and Apple.
Precisely. And that binary is essential for understanding his reaction to the Eragon. He is stepping into this analysis with the default setting of distrust. He assumes Disney is going to mess it up.
So the fact that he ends up being cautiously optimistic is actually a huge deviation from his usual narrative.
It really is. It means something specific about this Eragon project broke through his defense.
All right, so let's get to that project, Eragon, the Inheritance Cycle. For listeners who maybe haven't touched this book since they were 12 years old, let's do a quick reset. What is this story?
It is the archetypal hero's journey, and I mean that in the best way.
Del Arroz recaps it fairly succinct. You have a farm boy, Eragon. He's living a simple life with his uncle and his cousin in a tiny village called Carvajal.
He goes hunting in the Spine, big, dangerous mountain range covers.
Which, spoiler alert, for a 20-year-old book, is not a stone.
Definitely not a stone. It hatches into a dragon. Her name is Saphira. And this event binds Eragon to her. It marks his palm with the Gedri Igja, and it makes him the first dragon rider in a generation.
And in this world, being a dragon rider is basically death.
Right. The lore is that the dragon riders were once keepers of the land of Alagaësia, but they were destroyed by one of their own, Galbatorix, who is now the Tyrannosaurus.
So Eragon is instantly public enemy number one.
It's the classic setup. Farm boy, secret destiny, evil king. You can't go wrong.
Eragon has to flee his home. He gathers allies, including the village storyteller, Bram, who just happens to know way more about dragons than he should.
Funny how that works out.
He learns magic, learns sword fighting, and essentially joins the Varden, the rebellion, to overthrow Galbatorix and restore justice to the land.
And we have to mention the context of the author, Christopher Paolini. Del Arroz makes a big point of this. Paolini wrote the first book when he was 15.
15 years old. Which Del Arroz notes is kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's incredibly impressive. It shows this raw, unbridled talent.
Oh, absolutely.
But on the other hand, the early books have very strong young adult or YA elements. Because they were literally written by a teenager.
Right. The writing matures as the series goes on. Paolini has spent years.
And the world is still growing. Del Arroz brings up the book Murtaugh, which came out in 2023.
Yeah. Focusing on Eragon's half-brother and his red dragon, Thorn. This is important because it proves that this isn't a dead IP.
Exactly. It's not just nostalgia mining. The creator is still actively expanding the universe, and the books are still hitting bestseller lists. This world is alive.
Okay, now we can't talk about Eragon without talking about the elephant, that 2000.
The source brings this up immediately. It didn't go so well, is how he puts it.
That is putting it mildly.
Very mildly. The 2006 film is widely considered one of the worst fantasy adaptations of that era. It rushed the plot. It changed the lore about magic and the races of Alagaësia. It killed the franchise potential immediately.
Dead on arrival. Del Arroz notes that even Paolini didn't like it, though he quotes Paolini saying he was glad it was made because it introduced millions of people to the books.
Which is a very, very classy way of saying the movie was terrible, but at least it sold some paperbacks.
It's the ultimate silver lining argument.
But it creates a baseline of such low expectation. The bar is on the floor. Anything Disney does will almost certainly be better than the 2006 movie.
But that doesn't quell the specific fears Del Arroz has about how Disney will handle it now in 2026.
Right. This is where we get into what we're calling the Disney fear factor. Del Arroz is terrified. He says it plainly. That's what scares me about Disney. And he's not talking about bad CGI or poor acting.
No.
He is talking about culture. He is very explicit here. He fears race swaps and political crap. Those are his exact words.
And he looks at recent Disney adaptations and he sees a pattern.
He brings up Percy Jackson. Now, Rick Riordan, the author of Percy Jackson, was heavily involved in that Disney Plus show. He promised fans it would be faithful.
He was on social media constantly reassuring everyone.
Yeah. But Del Aros argues that despite those promises, what we got was political crap and race swaps.
Specifically, the casting of Annabeth Chase, a character described as white and blonde in the book, played by a black actress in the show. For Del Aros, this isn't just a cast.
No, for him, it's a betrayal of the source material. He sees it as part of a larger Hollywood agenda.
He also throws in a rumor about the upcoming Harry Potter series, which is HBO, not Disney, but it fits his broader Hollywood narrative. He mentions these rumors of a race swap Severus Snape.
Right. And he connects these dots to form a theory. He says, it seems to be a requirement to remove white people from things. That is his operating.
So he believes there is an intentional mandate to change the demographics of these classic stories. And when he looks at a story like Eragon, which has a, predominantly white European-coded setting,
he's bracing for impact. He assumes they will do the same thing.
And this leads to what he calls the Authen trap. Paolini's team, right now, is saying all the right things. They're saying the show will capture the true heart of Alagaësia.
But Del Aros immediately counters. J.K. Rowling said that. Rick Riordan said that.
It's the cycle of marketing, isn't it? Every adaptation starts with this huge press tour about, we're going to be so faithful to the book.
Yeah, and then according to Del Aros, the studio interference kicks in, and those promises just evaporate. He quotes a specific report he saw about the Eragon production that said the show is not going to be entirely the same.
And that one phrase, not entirely the same, just sets off all the alarm bells for him.
He says, that always scares me a little bit because in his mind, not the same is code. It's code for we are going to inject modern politics into this fantasy.
It basically confirms his worst suspicions that the studio intends to alter the DNA of the story from the very beginning.
And yet.
This is the big however. Despite all of that, despite the Disney logo, despite the Percy Jackson precedent, despite the rumors, Del Aros is cautiously optimistic.
So why? What makes Eragon different?
It comes down to the creative team, and specifically the legal structure behind the creative team. This is probably the most fascinating insight in his entire deep...
The lawyer argument. I love this detail. It feels like such an insider piece of information.
It's a great detail. So Paolini is a co-showrunner. He is heavily involved, but being involved isn't enough. We just established that Rick Riordan was involved.
The difference here, according to Del Aros, is the lawyer.
Paolini reportedly uses the same lawyer as Brandon Sanderson.
Okay, so why does that matter? For listeners who don't follow the business side of publishing, what's the significance of that?
Well, Brandon Sanderson is famous in the industry for retaining ironclad creative. He has famously refused to sell his rights unless he can guarantee the adapt follows his vision. He has the leverage and the willingness to just walk away.
So the logic here is, if Paolini has Sanderson's lawyer, he might just have Sanderson's contract.
Exactly. It implies that Paolini might have the contractual teeth to prevent Disney from, in Del Aros' view, breaking the law.
Del Aros says this bodes pretty well for the show. It suggests that Paolini isn't just a figurehead, a consultant they can ignore. He might actually have the power to say no.
That is a slender reed to hang your hopes on, but in the world of Hollywood negotiations, a good lawyer is worth more than 1,000 good.
It's the difference between being a consultant and being a boss. If the contract actually says author has veto power over character design, then the studio has to list. There's no way around.
So Del Aros is banking on the idea that Paolini learned from that 2006 disaster, and, to use a colloquialism, he lawyered up before signing anything with the mouth.
Okay, so that's one pillar of hope. What's the other one?
The people actually making the show. The showrunners, we have two Todds.
The two Todds.
Todd Harthan and Todd Helbing. Del Aros does a live background check on them during his analysis. It's actually pretty funny to watch.
So let's start with Todd Harthan. What's his deal?
Del Aros looks at his credit. High potential, kill point, the Lone Star.
And his reaction is basically a shrug. He hasn't seen these shows. Harthan seems to be a procedural guy, a TV veteran, but not necessarily a genre specialist.
He's the wild card. Del Aros doesn't know if he's good or bad, which just creates more uncertainty.
So no red flags, but no green flags either. Just a question.
A big question mark. But then he looks at the other Todd Helbing.
And this is where the optimism really starts. Helbing has credits like Superman and Lois, The Flash, and Black Sails.
And Del Aros calls Black Sails a good show.
Which is high praise coming from him. And for what it's worth, Black Sails is a fantastic show. It's gritty, it's complex, it's character-driven, it's a prequel to Treasure Island, but it weaves real history with...
So it shows that Helbing knows how to handle an ensemble cast, high-stakes drama, and that sort of period-style dialogue.
Right. Delarose also calls Superman Lois decent, though he mentions there were issues. But overall, Helbing is the one who brings the geek cred to the table.
So Delarose's analysis is that Helbing is the fantasy guy who understands Ra.
And maybe Harthan is the guy who keeps the production running on time, the rein-it-in guy, the logistical mind.
That's the theory. And this combination makes Delarose a little happier. It tips the scales for him. He feels that with Helbing there, someone in that writer's room understands how to make a serious adventure show.
So we have a good lawyer and we have a showrunner who made Black Sails. And that is enough to combat the Disney fear factor, at least for now.
Cautiously optimistic. That is the final verdict, but it comes with a big condition. He says he will be watching closely. He is going to be looking for those woke elementers. If they appear, he promises to report on them.
He says, I'll report on all of them as they come out and let you guys make the decision.
So he's positioning himself as the watchdog, the canary in the coal mine for the fans who share his concern.
It's a total wait-and-see approach. He hopes they don't go full-on woke, but he acknowledges the reality of the industry. He is ready to sound the alarm if the show drifts too far from the book.
It's a fascinating balance of hope and cynicism. It really is. Now, before we wrap up the Eragon part of this, we have to talk a little bit more about the man himself, John Delarose. Because watching this source material, you get a real sense of who he is as a person. He goes on these amazing tangents that really, they humanize him and they give context to all his criticism.
The book review.
The book review. He spends a significant chunk of time talking about a leather-bound edition of Dragon Quest from a company called Grim Oak Press.
And this was a really fascinating glimpse into the collector's minds. He paid $150 for this book, and he is so torn about it.
He's going back and forth. One minute he says, it's pretty nice, but then he immediately says, I would have liked a little more from a $150 book.
He thinks it should have been maybe $80 or $100. He's talking about the texture of the leather, the quality of the binding.
And the drama about the ribbon. This was my favorite part. He admits he made a mistake in a previous video where he said there wasn't a ribbon bookmark.
And he corrects himself live on camera. He's like, oh, there is a ribbon in it. I was wrong.
It's such a small detail, but it shows that he cares about the physical artifact of the book. He loves the medium. He loves fantasy. He isn't just some critic shouting at clouds. He's a fan who buys expensive leather-bound book and worries about whether they have a ribbon bookmark.
It completely reinforces his identity as a real fantasy. He isn't an outsider to this culture. He is in the trenches. He's buying the merch. He's reading the books. It gives him a certain credibility with his audience. He puts his money where his mouth is.
And he is writing the books, too. He spends the last part of the video plugging his own series, Steaming Country.
Right. Set in the world of Ath and the country of Lolland. He frames his own work as the direct alternative to the Hollywood slop that he critiqued. He calls it real independent fantasy.
He has a direct call to action. He says, thank you guys so much for supporting real independent fantasy because I can't do it without readers like you.
It's a call to arms. If you don't like what Disney is doing, come read Steaming Country.
It's a very smart rhetorical move. He creates the problem, Disney ruining fan, and then he offers the solution, support indie authors. He positions himself as a refuge for the disaffected fan.
It's the full package. Yeah. Critic, creator, and community.
So let's pull back and look at the big picture here. We have Eragon, a beloved story about a boy and his dress. We have Disney, the massive corporate entity tasked with bringing it to life.
And we have the skeptics, represented here by Delarose, who are armed with pattern recognition and this deep-seated distrust of modern cultural shift.
It is a tension that defines this entire era of entertainment. The battle between the original vision, or at least our nostalgic memory of it, and the modern adaptation.
And Paolini is caught right in the middle of it. He's trying to navigate a studio system that often chews up creators, while also trying to please a fan base that is on high alert for any sign of betrayal.
And that lawyer argument suggests that maybe, just maybe, the creators are learning how to fight back. They're lawyering up, demanding control.
Which is a genuinely positive sign, I think. If this golden age is going to be actual gold and not just, pyrite, it will be because creators like Paolini and Sanderson force the studios to respect the source material.
So we wait to see if the dragons soar or if they get Disney-fied, as the saying goes. But before we go, there was one final comment from the source that really stuck. It was just a throwaway line, but it felt like a prophet.
Ah, the AI comment.
AI comment. He mentions that he doubts Hollywood will ever adapt his own, but then he says, maybe I'll be able to do it later on when AI...
That is a profound thought to end on. We spend so much time and energy debating whether Hollywood will ruin our favorite books, but Delarose is looking past Hollywood entirely.
He's imagining a future where the author doesn't need us, where the author can just use AI to generate the movie directly from their own.
So here's the final question for you to chew on. If fans lose faith in big studios to create faithful adaptations, will the future of faithful adaptations actually move away from human studios entirely.
Will we see a world where Christopher Paolini just prompts an AI with his own tech and generates the perfect, 100% faithful Eragon series, bypassing Disney completely?
It raises a massive question about the value of interpretation versus direct translation. I mean, if an author makes the movie themselves, is it still a movie? Or is it just a visualization of the text? And do we lose something important when we remove the collaboration, even the friction of a studio production?
That is a deep dive for another day. But for now, we keep our eyes on the skies of Alagaësia and hope for the best. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Keep reading.